Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. All right, and we're live. Welcome back to Table Talk. We have another really great guest episode here for you. We have Brian Lynch joining us. Go ahead and give us a little intro and definitely talk about all the cool stuff that you're doing right now, because I'm so excited about your projects.
Oh, well, well, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on. Yeah, my name's Ryan Lynch. I'm a professional illustrator and graphic designer. And have been doing that for years, probably over a decade now. And then over the past couple of years, I have been working on my own TTRPG called Perils and Princesses. It's inspired by fairy tales, classic fairy tales, sort of mid-century Disney fairy tales. And yeah, I've been working on that for a couple of years, writing and illustrating it. The Kickstarter happened last summer. I'm getting ready to send it out to all my backers in the next week or so. But yeah, it's kind of been my main focus. Kind of getting back into TTRPGs and other kind of lonelier hobbies since the pandemic, you know?
Lonelier hobbies. I feel called out.
That's too real. Yeah, honestly.
Before that, I was craft markets and DJing and concerts and all these like social outlets. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that TTRPGs aren't social. Very
crowd heavy.
Yeah, very crowd heavy, very like communal, which is fine, but that kind of went away. And TTRPGs and gaming in general kind of filled that void for me. And I got really sort of just focused on these kind of fairy tale stories and nostalgic about it and wanted to make a game. So that's kind of where that came.
Yeah, I love it. I was so excited when Ollie sent Perils and Princesses to me because, like, I just come off watching the Dimension 20.
The Never After.
Like, Never After horror fairy tale thing. And so, like, I'm also obsessed with, like, folk tales and fairy tales and, like, how both, like, wonderful and eternally enjoyable they are, but how, like, the understory of them is just so fucked up and creepy. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I love this. This is so cute.
Yeah, I got obsessed with like the art style specifically because like I'm an artist too, and I was just like the way that you illustrate is so aesthetically pleasing to me.
Oh,
and all of it just looks so cute.
It's very like clean and like minimal. Yeah. Like the use of color is nice because it's enough to accent it, but it's not like, I don't know. It's relaxing to look at.
Oh yeah,
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, that's where it all started, was kind of with drawing and sketching and just thinking about this stuff while I'm sitting watching my kids and, you know, drawing these fairy tale characters on my iPad. And that's kind of where it started. But as far as the colors go, I knew, like you were saying, like fairy tales have this like long history, right? Like they're older than even, you know, you kind of go back to the Grimm's fairy tales as the collection, but they're even older than that. And they've been redone so many times, and there's with so many different styles. So I knew that I wanted to incorporate a lot of that, like within, you know, like a range and layers of different, you know, collaged upon, like built upon aesthetics. And so if I limited the colors, I could kind of get away with more variety.
Yeah, like letting that be the point of continuity.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, is there any like specific stories that you drew like a lot of inspiration from for this, or like what are kind of like the unique takes that you took on the fairy tale concepts? And I mean, overall, if you want to talk about like the general mechanics of it, because I know it's very like story based, but you had some really interesting like mechanics for like the princesses and the different classes of princesses that I'd love to like get your take on those.
Yeah, so a lot of it, one of my favorite movies ever is Sleeping Beauty, and I think that's like a big starting point. Oh, absolutely. Like the artwork is great. The story is sometimes like the main character Aurora gets some flack for like not having as much agency as maybe if Sleeping Beauty came out now, they'd probably write her a little bit differently. But again, it's all about the fairies though, right? Like the humans are sort of secondary to this like cool fairy war that's happening between her trio of fairy godmothers, and then like the evil Fey Queen. And I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but that kind of was
Please do.
That's like a big that was a big starting point for me, was that movie in particular. And then watching some of the newer ones with my kids, like Moana, for instance, and thinking about like what are these skills that they have that's a little bit different than, because at the same time I was watching these Disney movies and these fairy tale movies with my younger kid, and then I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with my older kid, who's 11. So I've got like a 3-year-old. I have a 3-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I was playing D&D with the older kid, watching princess movies with the younger kid, and just kind of melding that world in my mind, and what would be like if Moana or Cinderella were in this dungeon, right? One of the main things was I wanted all the skills in the game to be internal. So it's not strength, it's resolve. It's not dexterity, it's grace. It's all about, because that's how a princess would overcome, or princess in one of these stories, or even a fairy tale hero like Frodo Baggins, right? He's not strong, but it's all about the inner strength. So all the skills have to do with kind of testing your virtues, your inner strength. So that like is the very basis of how these characters are going to relate to the game world. And then kind of having fun with different princessy and fairy tale tropes as far as like the special abilities for their gifts, right? Like summoning animals. How does that work? If you can like give a little whistle and have the woodland creatures help you, or shaping the elements, or talking to the elements, or making fun little concoctions and whimsical kind of abilities, like in Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. Like how, like just having fun with the long history of fairy tales and the different things that they can do, and then these kind of humble characters as they go on their wild adventures.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like psychologically and fun from that perspective, because as much flack as traditional fairy tales do sometimes get for not giving, actually, the female main characters agency of like, I love that you've taken that and noticed their skills and put that into
like the forefront
of a game. And I also love that, everything is internal, because that almost makes it more approachable or applicable for like younger kids that are playing this. Like it's a nice twist on the story, where like you do still have all those great elements of the traditional fairy tales. But it's nice because it connects them and grounds them more as like real people.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Well, yeah, I even had like, sometimes you get, I post a lot on TikTok, and that's how I've kind of built the community around this. But then one of the good and bad things about TikTok is that it shares it out to people that might not be your audience or might not be following along.
Oh yeah.
So you get new people, but you also get people that don't get it. So yeah, I had some comments like, I was showing the different abilities, and they're like, "Oh, these seems just so stereotypically feminine. Like, what's up with that?" And I was like, "Well, that's the intent, and two, the point is to highlight those internal things. So even if you're a young boy playing, you're not emulating, like there's enough games about how good you are at like fighting and killing. So they are like deliberately internal and more soft skills, and like these kind of like underrated, humble kind of magics.
Yeah, like how do you relate to people? How do you work with like your environment, or how do you like use that with like working with the animals, or working with the elements of like your connection to like the earth. And it's different things that like are traditionally by society coded more feminine. But one, like that's an interesting point, because like one, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Why is that a problem?
Right.
And like we won't get on that soapbox, but like that's a different episode that we have already recorded. But it's a very cool little framework to think about how we classify abilities and fantasy characters, and like what makes someone a hero. And that's cool.
Yeah, and that it's not always like the big strong person punching the bad guy. Like they're and I guess it kind of also can relate back to like the traditional like D&D or general TTRPG experience of like people that are more like murder hobos and like into maxing out their combat capabilities. But then there's people that are like, yeah, there's combat and that's a thing, but like I also enjoy finding creative solutions to a problem. And like I think your game specifically emphasizes on that respect of like, yeah, there like strength is a thing that you can have and you can deal with things in that way, but there's so many other more interesting skills to use than just fighting your way bare knuckle through a conflict.
How much do you bonk?
Yeah, how much to bonk versus like finding those kind of unique solutions with all the other things on your character sheet that you could possibly use.
Yeah, and yeah, that's 100% it. Like I wanted to emphasize like that kind of creativity, and even going back to like influences. Like there's a whole bunch of I found myself, you know, kind of while I was sort of minding my mind and memories for things to abilities to give these different characters. There's lots of storybooks that are sort of I would call like the mid-century wave of fairy tales. Like you've got The Last Unicorn, or even, you know what, even Lord of the Rings, right? Like Frodo and Sam and even Aragorn, like their biggest skills, like there's fighting in Lord of the Rings, and especially in the movies, there's these, you know, beautiful epic battles, but the moments are all about like the healing ones. In the book, they're singing songs to each other constantly to like inspire them.
It's like in moments of interpersonal relating and interpersonal connection that stand out, and it's like why people keep coming back to those stories. Yeah,
exactly. So I really wanted to make a game, and again, there's swords are fun, bows and arrows are fun. They're in the game. Everyone can be a badass, but the special abilities, what makes the character stand out, is going to be how they work with each other and how they work with the world. And that's that kind of like humble, that I always say humble magic, or the little things that make a big difference is what the game is really about at its core.
I love that so much.
Same.
I love that so much because I think it also like one, as like a woman that grew up on like princesses and all that goodness. One, yeah, like the new kind of wave of princesses nowadays that are like a lot more self-sufficient, a lot more like it's not all about like her being saved by the prince or whatever. Yeah. It's a lot about like her own personal journey and all these other things, and taking those influences, making a game based around that. But also I think like we've discussed this plenty of like the differences between like those kind of masculine and feminine spaces, especially when it relates to these like tabletop role-playing games. And like, I know in my first experience ever at a table, I had people that were, you know, not super invested in the story or anything. And they were just there to bonk. But I was really finding my joy in, like you said, like finding those creative solutions, really digging into the other stuff that my character can do and trying to optimize like solving problems with whatever else I've got in my arsenal. And I think like your game, one, on top of it being such a cool concept, so well illustrated, is like really playing into that and offering a space where it's like, you know, this is what you can do. And I think like you said, you're going to find people that are like 100% about it. And then there's going to be those few out there that are like, I don't get it. And it's like, well, it's not for you.
Yeah, that's with everything though. Like you have to make things that you enjoy. I mean, that goes for everything, like books, art, games, anything. You have to make things that you enjoy, and people who enjoy what you enjoy will also like it, but you will never please anyone. And if you try to please everyone, then you'll never make anything.
Oh yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and princesses have, like you said, they have a lot of baggage. Like, centuries of baggage.
They do.
And some people but some people are going to be turned off by it immediately no matter what, and that's fine. That's their call. You don't have to, you know what I mean? But I think a lot of people really, I mean, I for one, I love princess movies. I always have. I love princess stories and all that stuff. And for me, this, you know, it was kind of a healing journey to make a big pink book, you know, and draw these like woodland characters. But some people, it's going to turn them off, you know, whether they think it's silly or frivolous, whether they think it's, like I guess, princess culture, princess, like it's problematic, and that, you know, and that's part of its history. So if you're turned off by that immediately, that's fine. But that's not what I'm going for here. I want to do something that's about fun and adventure, you know. But yeah, it's not. If you get it, I think a lot of people are responding really well to it and like really loving digging in. So it's been really exciting to see.
Oh yeah, you've gotten a lot of really great support and like on the Kickstarter and all that stuff, and like I know I shared it to literally like
Mhm.
nearly every person that I know because I was like, please look at this. It's so
Like, you must
it's
see
so
it. You
great.
must consume this content.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Awesome. And generally just like on the topic of influences in art, like uh is there anything in particular that like kind of inspired your specific art style? I know I've seen a lot of like your marketing work and stuff, but like the Princess and Peril's art style is like very unique. In its own way. Is there any like specific influence you can attribute to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things going on with how I kind of started drawing the princesses, how I did, and the monsters in the books. I what I wanted to do is, first of all, keep it simple so I could draw a lot of them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't, there's some beautiful old um, fairy tale illustrations where they use etching or ink and draw every leaf on every tree, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to accomplish that, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessary, and it's been done before, right? But what I really liked um, how someone like Arthur Rackham or some of those old classic fairy tale illustrations have these kind of uh, a way of drawing faces and a way of posing the people that is a very like kind of very deliberate and has foundational kind of storybook compositions and poses, and so I wanted to capture that, but with the rendering I wanted to layer on this like childlike imagination, so I wanted everything to look like you've got this combination of almost like a coloring book where you have a classic illustration,
Yeah.
and then a kid is frantically scribbling, and that act of
Mhm.
scribbling and imagining and filling in the blanks while you're doing it. I wanted everything to have that energy. So there's some old public domain pieces that are like old engravings and stuff, and then there's the illustrations I did of the princesses themselves. All have, I don't know, like I wanted to give them this energy as far as like a childlike kind of way of making marks and a way of rendering them out.
It definitely reads that way. Now that you're like talking
Yeah.
about it, I was like, oh no, yeah, it does have like both the elements of like really like traditional like storybook drawings, but then it's got like the grainy and grit of like a child kind of drawing this with like a crayon kind of thing. Yeah, I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I'm glad you're I'm glad you're appreciating that, because it's like there's these layers to playing role playing games, especially a fantasy role playing game where you have the source material like either like medieval stories or folk tales or whatever, and then
The traditional fantasy.
and then you have like the Dungeons and Dragons, like the 60s 70s like gritty kind of weird fantasy interpretation, which is also very cool, but it's been done a lot. And then on top of that you have like your own imagination as you're bringing these to life. So I wanted it to have like just layers of different things happening, and I think it worked okay where you've got, I don't know, it's just fun and interesting images to make and images to like play with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you very much accomplished that, and
Absolutely,
it's got the all the good elements of like fantasy but childlike wonder, and like I remember I saw a video of you doing like your kind of like isometric map layouts and stuff, and I was like, I love it because like the trees and the little and, like all of it is so fucking cool.
Yeah.
And just like as an artist, I was like, oh man, that like
It's good
it
steamy.
makes me want to just do like little childlike like drawings and stuff, and especially like we haven't mentioned this yet, but we're gonna get to play Princess and Perils in another like stream for
I'm so
RG5
excited.
with you hopefully, and that's gonna be
Yeah.
so cool. Do you have any like advice for us as like potential players of your game and like making our characters and stuff?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, one, and thanks for inviting me to that. I'm excited. I'm always down to
Yeah,
play.
absolutely. I was like,
Always
yeah.
down to play this game. Advice for making characters. I think so. There's a lot that's randomly rolled. You can go through and just have the game generate your princess. That can lead to a lot of cool things if you're not used to randomly generating your whole character. You kind of let the fates decide.
Let the game decide.
Yeah, and then you can. What it does is it lets you build a backstory in your head based on these prompts. Of course, if you have something you want to do, or if um, everyone in your party is building your characters together, and you kind of want different roles. That's fine too, but kind of encourage a little bit of randomness in this to get a little bit of surprise. Yeah, just lean into it.
When you were first, like, because Ollie and I have talked about potentially, like, as we create more content, like create more like narrative podcasts, and potentially how we would like to design like a board game or a TTRPG or something as in the future, just so different ways to tell stories. Like when you first started kicking this idea around, how did you decide that you wanted it to be a TTRPG, and like what did that initial process
look like?
Yeah, just from a morbid curiosity standpoint.
So no, that's a good question, and I think so. Again, at first, I'm a longtime artist and illustrator, so that's where I start. Right, I started drawing these, childish sort of marks and drawing these princesses and things. But then the next thing I started doing is just making lists of lists of different types of fairy godmothers, different types of things that princesses can do, different words that felt like they were the right mood, different like maybe names of places, names of different names of characters, different names of monsters. I was just making lots of lists of things. And yeah, like you said, I didn't know what those lists were going to be, but it just felt like random tables. It felt like random RPG tables, and then the gifts felt like things that you could do. And I could be, I'm not much of a comic writer or book writer, but at this point I was like, it felt like a toolbox more than a story. It felt like a world to give to people. So that's like, it started, I still go back to my notes app that just has long lists of words whenever I'm stuck, because I would just sit there on the floor with my 3-year-old writing, like watching Moana, watching Snow White, and just writing lists of like cool things and obsessing over the beautiful backgrounds in Snow White, because it's some of the best art ever.
Yeah. I love that. I love the toolbox and giving people a world to craft their own stories versus giving them a story, and like there being value in both. But that's a really interesting way of putting it, and I love that.
Yeah, that's
a lot of what TTRPG is. Yeah,
it's handing you the tools to write your own story, and it's like, here's everything you need to know about the pre-existing world or how it works, and you can also toss it or leave it depending on how you feel.
It gives you a place to start, so it's like you don't have to come up with everything from scratch. But it just gives you a scaffolding to then make people and throw them in and see what happens.
Oh, absolutely. And I even as someone who, I like reading, fairy tale books and fantasy books, even ones that are made for kids, and rereading them, especially as I've been getting into this. But I also like just reading RPGs. Even if I know I might never play it, I might never get around to playing it. That's like its own kind of play, right? Is like looking at, and maybe it's only like a certain type of person that gets kicks out of this, but I'm
honestly the same. Like I have so many setting books that I am not probably gonna run for years, but I just like to have them in my grubby little paws and be able to like, Ollie, don't look at me. I wasn't calling you out inadvertently. She just like give the most bombastic side eye in my direction. And I'm like, I was calling myself out. You do not need to feel attacked, ma'am.
I still feel attacked regardless, because I was
10:30 in the morning.
10:30 in the morning. But
yeah, like I love like, I don't know, just being able to like maladaptive daydream and like the different worlds and stuff, and come up with different ideas, and it's so fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, just, looking at art and reading the book, you can just imagine things that are it tickles your brain in a different way than reading a story does. And it's a way of playing it too, even if you never can get a group together to play that cool setting or book or whatever.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, like before, I've talked about this before, of the, like, we used to have a different, like DM, and then me and like my current players kind of all left that situation together. And we were, kind of left stuck without a DM. And when thinking about like who could kind of take up the mantle, it was like I was the one that had the bandwidth, the experience, and then also I had already just invested a bunch of money into like buying all these source books, even though I was just a player, because I just loved I loved looking at like the art that was done in them. But then, yeah, like just having these worlds at my disposal and like being able to look at them and like kind of fantasize about potentially playing is its own joy. And then, sure enough, came the time that we actually needed it, and I was like, okay, well, let me just go look at my plethora of material
like,
and
I do
decide
have all the
what we're
monster
gonna
manuals.
dive into.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to talk about, so like what is the name of the book? It's like The Glory of Giants, or I'm trying to remember.
The newest D&D book about the giants. The one that had like the AI generated.
Right. I don't remember.
Scandal. I do not remember what the name is. I was gonna try, but I.
It's like it's one of the characters. It's like a possessor.
Bigby presents Glory of the Giants.
That's it.
Oh,
yeah.
Bigby.
But yeah, I wanted to talk about like specifically, and also just from the general perspective of like artists in the community, like Bigby presents The Glory of Giants, and the whole issue that they had with having an artist like use AI generated art within like official Wizards of the Coast material, which like how that gets by.
How did that get past review? Like what creative director, like head designer, looked at those hands and was like, this is fine.
Yeah.
This seems legit.
Yeah, it's really too bad, because I mean, they're as Wizards of the Coast, as like the biggest name in fantasy games, with like someone who commissions so much artwork for Magic cards and for D&D books. Like, they have such an opportunity to like really be a patron of the arts and really be at the forefront of putting out amazing artwork, and they have the resources for it too. They could, they can do whatever they want in terms of artwork, and it's too bad that I mean, I kind of believe them where they were like, oh, we didn't know, because they were just sloppy. They didn't know this artist was like kind of hacky and really used AI art.
Yeah, they probably didn't look at it close enough, because like they are. If anyone hasn't seen them, like if you see them from afar, you're like,
they're not immediately noticeable.
It's not immediately noticeable.
It's more like if you know what to look for, then you start seeing things of like the sizes of things are wrong, or things in the background are too big or too small, or
there's a random little crawling tree in a picture of like what's supposed to be some dinosaur monster that definitely has an odd number of legs, but isn't immediately.
But it's not like this is a fun spicy boy that just runs on like a tripod leg situation. It's like, no, that leg shouldn't be there.
No, he's got 5 legs for some reason.
Like, it's not good for him either.
But like, yeah, I think part of that is a lot of the, like, I don't want to hate on any artists, because the D&D books have gorgeous art in them. But I will say,
oh, absolutely.
I will say there is like a Wizards of the Coast style. Like, between like how their D&D books have looked for the last few years and how like Magic cards look. Now, Magic cards, they do have like kind of alternate art these days that they branch out a little bit, but there's totally a Wizards of the Coast style, and it's kind of samey. Like, and I wonder if that's how it was overlooked, because like it all kind of looks, maybe because AI is using Wizards art, or like people that were influenced by it.
It's just kind of blending in.
And
then, realistically, that's probably what they did. Of like, they conditioned it on, they fed it, with previous artwork, because like that's AIs only know what you teach them, right? So if it was fed with that either traditional like comic style work, or that like old school kind of weird fantasy, high fantasy stuff that is traditionally what Wizards of the Coast puts out, which like it's beautiful, but yeah, it is that fairly bracketed style, then yeah, I see how somebody could be like, well, maybe AI would do a good enough job, since this has been pretty consistent over the years. And Yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall
in that
in those
meeting.
stand-up meetings when that was getting like, because who, like, simply who
I just would
isn't
challenge,
look.
yeah, I would challenge all the art directors at Wizards of the Coast to like come up with like make a creative decision, or make take a stand on like the next new book and have it look totally wild or totally different, or hire an artist that has like an out there art style, and just like, like
Yeah, give
you've
it like
got,
some fresh, new, unique. Because there's definitely
yeah,
plenty of art styles that can still
Mhm.
fall within that realm of fantasy,
for
and you
sure.
see it all the time with like third party
Mhm.
creators of like TTRPG source books and etc. That they're using all these different kinds of artists. One of our friends back, she recently kickstarted it's like a monster hunting
Yeah.
uh it's like cool kind of interplanar monster hunting, all
Mhm.
this other stuff. And the concept art that is all over that we cannot get enough of. It is so unique and like it's got a little bit of like kitschy,
Yeah,
goofy.
like some of the monsters are like food. There's like
Yeah.
mochi,
It
not
sounds so
beholders,
familiar.
mimics.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like, it's
Like a
just
chili
so cool.
pepperoni
Yeah.
demon. It is
Yeah.
so cool. But like yeah, like you can do so much with it and still have it be well received, and you don't have to box yourself in creatively. And like you said, if anything, I think the community would also like appreciate it, and you're giving more kinds of artists more opportunity as well,
Right.
because you're not just sticking to that to people that can achieve that similar style. You're kind of opening up to all amounts of talent.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. And that, yeah, if anyone has the resources, it's Wizards of the Coast. And I just sometimes I get really nostalgic when I look at like Magic the Gathering cards from the 90s, where kind of anything went. They were weird. They like were paintings. They had just like every card was a different style, and it kind of was like one of the cool things about that game when it started. And
Mhm.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
yeah, if you look at uh just old Magic the Gathering cards, they the style is all over the place, and a lot of them, I mean, that's like pre-digital art too, so they were all done
Mhm.
by hand. Not that
Oh, true. Yeah.
um I mean, not that you like, I do all my stuff digitally too, but I try to make it look like hand. But yeah, I just
Yeah,
think
but it was different when like all you had was Microsoft Paint. Like there wasn't much you could
There
do.
wasn't much you could do digitally.
You kind of had to draw, like sketch
yeah,
it out on
And
yeah.
paper
scan
and
it.
scan it and send it in.
um but yeah, no, I just think because that's part of, again, another cool thing about doing fantasy art is it doesn't have to be um I did a post on TikTok about this recently, about drawing horror or scary things, and for me, I like when you don't,
Mm-hmm.
like, you can draw something scary, or you can make the fantasy real by drawing every detail, and that's kind of what Wizards does now, is they try to draw every little buckle on their armor.
It's as
And
realistic as possible.
yeah,
Yeah.
but for me, I I would rather get more abstract, and that's kind of, there's some old interviews with Tolkien where he says his favorite artwork that people have done of his books is the most abstract stuff, where just a shadow of a color is more frightening than drawing every little detail of this ghost or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I really love like kind of the Baroque, like Roman Gothic esque style of art
Mm-hmm.
because it does use mood and color a lot. And like there are pieces where like yes, they are detailed and they do write things down, but it is more of like the contrast of colors and that sense that something is lurking in the
Sure.
background. And that's really cool to me.
Yeah, or it's like in anything like in the general concept of horror. I think like the more you leave to the imagination, the more
Yes. The
like
scarier it can be and the
yeah,
more tension
Oh
it
yeah,
creates. And also the concept of like when you're making monsters and making creatures that you can in fact do whatever you want and like you don't have to be bound necessarily by what like animals that we see or like where there's a lot of it where like yeah you build off something, right? So it's like they kind of have like 2 feet or 4 feet or like whatever, but like no, you can have It can walk on hands. It can just be hands
It could really,
down there. Like, you can do whatever you want and do some mind bendy, breaky things, and that's really cool. But I also think like it's a lot of people pull back from that a bit, especially like bigger, more established things, because they don't necessarily know how it's going to be received. But I think people are a lot more open to it now than they might have been,
And that's something
Prior.
AI can't
5-10
really,
years ago.
AI can't really accomplish that on like it can it can accidentally achieve sort of horrifying things, but it won't ever. I don't know. It's that human knowledge of where that line is and where, kind of what colors and shadows and mood and how real you want to make something. Like those are all decisions that human artists make a million times in a minute when they're making an image. And AI just can kind of take things other people have done and smush them together and maybe accidentally come up with that. But it's just never as good. It always just kind of falls flat.
Yeah, flat is definitely like the key word for me, because like especially, and like I'm sure you encounter this too, but like as someone like running games and I'm constantly looking for like NPC art, for example, and like now Pinterest is like inundated with AI generated art, and like there's been a couple times where I'm like, oh, I almost didn't catch that this was AI art, but it's also like there is a tell to it, and it is that like kind of flat lifelessness. That like I think a computer is never going to be able to generate, and like they all start to resemble a very similar style, or like all of these female AI generated characters have a similar face because of like that specific
that's
like,
what
beauty
the program
standard
knows.
or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what the program knows. And like everything starts to look the same, and it's just a matter of like subtle, like not even subtle is the wrong word, but just like random little differences in like their clothing or their hair, but like everything starts to fall real flat against what like literally any art that I've ever seen made by another person.
Yeah, and I mean it's fundamentally because obviously there's not a consciousness behind that, so it's like things that are appealing or things that are frightening or disturbing. Like a computer can't fully relate to that because they don't have a human psyche and they're not aware of like why something is unsettling. Even and sometimes that is unconscious. Also, when you're creating art or when you're like for me when I'm brainstorming stories or things like the things that unsettle you or that you enjoy or that like light you up or whatever aren't always things you consciously know. But as you sit down and think about them, you're like, okay, no, I see why this is triggering this reaction for me. And a computer just can't really replicate that.
Yeah.
Because there's not a way to really teach that. Not now, certainly. And I mean, that's a whole other podcast and episode of like where the future of AI and like recreating human consciousness and all of that. But, like, I don't know if that'll ever be a thing that can be done. But certainly not for a long while yet. I think. And like AI has its uses. Like I'm not against it, but when it comes to things like you need a human hand and mind behind it.
Yeah.
Well, my hope for AI or what we call generative AI or that kind of technology is that my hope is that we're in sort of like the awkward baby phase of it, where people aren't using it with discretion. No one knows how to legislate it. Kind of like early CGI or like early filmmaking or anything where it's just kind of a mess as we're figuring it out. My hope is that it becomes a really useful tool, because I can, like, even as someone who does the kind of design and artwork I do, I can, like, for instance, Adobe has certain tools in their software that use generative AI, and some of them have a lot of potential, right? Like
the autofill
stuff is dope.
That's so cool. I need to put Photoshop on my laptop to like fill in with that. I saw a thing where like you could like make a flat lay with that. And I'm like, ooh, I want to do. I don't even know what I'd make a flat lay of, but I'm gonna find something.
and even if it's not as good as it won't be as good as actually shooting more the proper photo, right? But I can think of so many times, like in my career working at marketing agencies, where I wish I had like another inch of photo of like negative
Yep.
space around the photo, right? Where I'm like, oh, I gotta
Mhm.
To
I wish
fill the dimension requirement.
Yeah.
You're like, I just need a little bit of buffer on this.
And
Like
now I
we
gotta
ran
fake
this
it.
right up to the edge.
Yeah, and now I gotta like copy and paste, and like it's a whole thing. I'm like, man, that would make my life easier. Or I could see if a future
Mhm.
where if I don't know, like they kind of use this for like generating crowds of people, but like if I could feed AI, 50 Perils and Princesses characters and have it kind of use my style in a good way to make another one or iterate on it for me, that would be very helpful, but I just can't quite do that now where it can't take a specific limited set very well and then expand upon it in a way that it looks anything like the original. So
I've also seen like a lot of artists that will use AI to kind of generate like a general thumbnail before they really start like their content, and they use that as like a point of reference to really go off of like their actual artwork. And I'm like, and it,
that's interesting.
The evolution of like artists, especially going digital, like there's lots of people that like have whatever fucking opinions they have about things like using 3D models so that
There's
you don't
a lot
have
of
to
weird
like do your
elitism.
anatomy work ahead of time, or like especially if working as a commission artist,
Mhm.
like it's nice to have like a 3D model that you can work off of,
Right.
because then you don't have to spend so many hours perfecting all that anatomy before you even start like
Anything
getting
that's
into
the
actual-
characterization.
characterization, illustration, or whatever. It saves you time, and it's part of like tools that you use as part of the profession. So I agree with you in the sense of like I hope that it gets to a point where it's more normalized as like it's a tool to use to assist in the work,
Yes.
but not necessarily something that replaces artists. Because I also feel like one, AI can only work off of art that has already been previously created. And so if you get into a point where like artists are completely negated and it's only going to work off of the art that has already been done, you're going to stop getting like unique innovations in art. You're going to stop getting like unique concepts and like that feeling of when you find an artist with a style that you've never fucking seen before.
Well, and it goes beyond art too, into like writing and how we tell stories and how we express ideas. And like I work for a tech company and we work on like developer security, and so it's a drum I beat regularly when working with people because I edit for a living. And so it's very apparent to me when something is AI written and when a person has written it, and when it's just been like somebody ran a couple queries through and hodgepodged it together and submitted it, and I'm like, hey yo, this can't fly. Because it does not sound like a person wrote it. And it's like, it's great to use as a supplemental tool to make an outline, to generate ideas, to get reference photos for things like that. But it has to be used in conjunction and as a supplement to a person's ability and talent. It cannot replace that, because that's when we start going off the rails. And I think that's what we're all in every industry and space that's using it having a hard time nailing that balance. Because it's so easy to feel like, well, maybe I can just have it do it for me. If you're stressed and you're late and you're running behind and you don't, and like life is, going into just fucking hellfire, because I do be doing that as an adult sometimes.
Listen, I feel that. I'm in marketing and my boss will sometimes be like, can you write me a script for this? And I'm like, I'm going to have a bot do it, because I got a million other things to do, and I will like course over it and correct when
and like if you
send it out.
And like that writes, and then you edit it and like that can be okay. But like tying it back to the D&D imagery stuff of, it's like I see how you fall into that trap, because I beat people back from that like multiple times a week at work, where I'm just like with a rake being like, now write your own shit. But like, it's a very slippery slope to use it and take advantage of it without letting it become a crutch or replace people who are creating any kind of content, spaces, whatever that is. That is my soapbox.
I hope that people develop a better eye for noticing. My hope is that my naive hope is that we'll figure this thing out and get better at using it, and people will be in a healthy, productive way that isn't taking advantage of anybody's actual creative work.
I don't think that's naive.
Yeah, that's my. I feel like that's happened in other realms.
Yes. Yeah. I genuinely think that will happen, and it's not that far off. I think it's just we've gotten a new toy kind of,
Yeah.
and everyone is really excited about it in the same way of like how you said with early video stuff or early like YouTube stuff or internet things, and like we're just having a hard time
Figuring out how to
counterbalancing
regulate it
Yeah, and
ethically.
we're swinging between the extremes, and it's just time to sort of find that balance.
Ooh.
And it's also an interesting conversation about like being conscious consumers of every kind of content, because I mean, like, I know I see TikToks and things where I'm like, cool, that was AI generated.
Yeah.
But like, this is the world that I live in all the time, either because like our side hustles, we're consuming content, or we both work in marketing, so we're consuming it through there, and like we're very like, you're an artist, or like when Ale looks things, or even when I do, because I don't draw a lot, but I know how to recognize it. But that's not true for everyone. And it's like, that's another point of education, I think, that is really interesting. And another thing that we're going to have to figure out of like, how do we help people that don't stare at this stuff all day be conscious consumers and understand why the slippery slope is slippery.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's just a slip and slide at this point. It's not just a slope.
No.
And it's affecting everything.
We look at so many images all day long, and it's hard to, and you get numb to them too. So that's why that AI, I feel like that is another, again, with the D&D book and with just marketing in general, you just see so many more images a day than you used to. So it's so like those weird extra legs, your brain can't handle it all and can't look.
Yeah, you
so
can only
like,
do so much.
So like those little, those little quirks of AI that when you point it out or notice it, you're like, oh God, what is that? That's horrible. How'd that get through? It's like, well, yeah, our brains are trying to filter through all this extra information all day.
Yeah, your brain's just like, ignore those 8 fingers. You don't need any more stress. Like, that's fine.
If you were
that's
counting
not
the
for
fingers,
you to notice.
counting the fingers on every person you saw, you wouldn't.
Like, yeah, that woman is in fact 12 heads tall, and her head is not proportional.
And we love that for her.
And we love that for her. I love that she's got linebacker shoulders.
But she needs a slightly bigger head.
She does need a slightly bigger head. I'm like,
just a little bit.
Yeah, I remember like I was in the gaming store that's like nearest me, and I saw the Glory of the Giants book, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is the one. They're still selling the ones with the fucking AI art in it. Every time I go in there, I open it up to look, and
we found one because I was like running over because I'd not seen it.
Yeah, and I like showed you all the ones, and you're like, oh yeah, that's just rough, buddy.
I was like, this is horrifying. Like, these are elder chores. What is this? And like not in a fun roleplay way. Like, like this should not. There's an elder chore here who invited Cthulhu to the fucking.
I just feel bad for the little dinosaur with too many legs, and he's just got a little tree buddy that's also crawling next to him. And I'm like, why is that tree?
It's like, why is that tree in here? It's too cold for him. There's a snowstorm going on. He's not gonna make it. He needs liquid water, not frozen water. Go home, friend. Like, open a portal and send him back through.
But yeah, I think it's like how you said. I think. Especially bigger companies like Wizards of the Coast, there's a responsibility they have in the space, as like you mentioned, being one like a very big patron of the arts because of the kind of content that they put out into the world. There's like a responsibility and accountability they have to take for that, but then also, support the artists that you're keeping in business.
Yeah, that was the thing I thought earlier of like, there's a responsibility to be an advocate for artists and creatives and to support the people that power your industry and keep things interesting and fresh and exciting. Because without the artists making the art or the writers making the stories or anything, like, there wouldn't be new stories. Like, there wouldn't be new books. There wouldn't be new settings.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think we all have an obligation to be an advocate for that, but most especially big corporations who are bankrolling that have an obligation to, because they have the resources to, where it's like, day-to-day consumers of like, there's a limit on what you can do or like the actual impact you can have, but like, no, it does come down to the industry leaders recognizing their role in that and being an advocate.
Yeah. And then especially like, I think generally, like you mentioned, as consumers of it, and it's like, listen, if the big corpo giants ain't gonna do it, then there's plenty of stuff that you can go out and support that are like independent creators, such as like your stuff with Perils and Princesses through Kickstarter and
Yep.
through a myriad of other means that like there's plenty of content out there that does not have to be like Wizards of the Coast D&D related to still tell these amazing stories.
Exactly. Yeah. There's 1,000,001
Yeah, and
game
like
systems and all that.
support artists because
Support artists.
because the bots ain't gonna give you the good shit. I'm so sorry.
It's true.
They're not.
I mean, there's no better time to like. I can't think like to get into indie games, and there's tools out there that have made it possible to get communities together, and for people like me who could just have an idea and have been able to make it through Kickstarter's marketing, through connecting on TikTok, through like online printers that can print small runs of stuff like that.
Which is so fucking
Yeah.
cool. Like to live in a time where you can have an idea
and
you're
form
like,
it and pop it out.
I'm gonna make a Pretty Princess game, and you can just fucking do it. And people are like, hell yeah, that's awesome. Give it to me now.
Yeah.
And like, that can turn into like a major part of your life and job. Like that's dope as hell.
Yeah, I mean it's been life changing, honestly. I'm tired as all get out. I can't wait. I can't wait to ship this thing
Seems
out.
stressful.
Yeah, I'm in like proofreading and editing. I'm almost done, and I'm ready to pull the trigger and get it out there to all the backers. But oh man, it's been a long journey.
Wow,
but
we
yeah,
are so excited for you. I cannot even
Same.
begin to explain. I'm excited to just play it.
Yes.
And also just have it in my little hands and have it join all of my other collectibles.
Stroke the
Yes.
pages gently.
Yes, please do. I mean, I love books, and I love printed art, and I love illustrations, and hopefully I can, hopefully this adds a little bit of joy to other people who like that stuff and can, put it on their shelves and play with their friends.
Play with their friends and their family.
With the queens.
Love that. Well, we are coming up on time here. But like, thank you so much for coming on and like talking to us all about it and having a cool little conversation with us. But yeah, definitely go check out Perils and Princesses. It's done on Kickstarter, right? Like it's
there's a few more days where you could sneak in on BackerKit to get a late pledge, but I'm about ready to shut her down.
Gotcha.
And
gotcha.
after,
by the time this episode releases, she's probably gonna be done.
She's probably gonna be done, and it's TBD how it's going to live on. I gotta make some decisions about how many extras I'm gonna get to sell, and if I'm gonna do print on demand. Like I've just got decisions to make, but it'll be around at least digitally. Once I get this first wave, all my early supporters, get them taken care of, and then I'll figure out where it lives from then on.
Heck yeah. Well,
could you give us a little like plug for your socials, or like where people could go to check out your stuff? Or
if you're interested in Perils and Princesses, you can go to perilsandprincesses.com. That's just like a landing site I have that has like lots of links. I am Outrider Creative. That's my illustration and design business is Outrider. So Outrider Creative, at Outrider Creative on Instagram and TikTok is where I'm mostly putting out my good news.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, and we'll see y'all next time.
All right. Thanks, friends.
Bye.
Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcast. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.